The dust-laden wind whipped across Eliza Cartwright's tear-stained face as she stumbled through the main street of Pahrump, Nevada Territory, clutching the tattered remains of her once beautiful dress against her body. The year was 1873, and everything she had worked for over the past 5 years had just crumbled before her eyes like the dry desert soil beneath her worn boots. Clara Valentine had never intended to arrive in Pahrump looking like she'd been dragged behind a stagecoach. The 22-year-old schoolteacher had traveled all the way from Boston with dreams of bringing education to the West, her trunk filled with books and her head filled with ideals. But the overturned stagecoach 3 miles outside of town had left her possessions scattered across the desert, and her prized blue cotton dress torn from shoulder to hem when she'd scrambled free from the wreckage. By some miracle, Clara had managed to gather her most precious belongings, her mother's locket, her teaching credentials, and a few salvaged books, but her appearance was beyond repair. With the driver injured and the other passengers seeing to him, Clara had no choice but to walk the remaining distance to town, the desert sun beating down mercilessly on her fair skin. She hadn't expected the entire town to be gathered for a Saturday market day when she arrived. "Look at the state of her." A woman's shrill voice cut through the general murmur of the crowd as Clara made her way down the dusty main street, coming into town looking like she's been wrestling coyotes. Laughter rippled through the onlookers, growing louder as Clara clutched her torn dress tighter around herself, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Must be one of them soiled doves from Carson City. Lost her way," shouted another voice, followed by more cruel laughter. Clara felt her throat constrict as she tried to maintain her dignity, chin raised despite the tears threatening to spill from her blue eyes. She had never felt so alone, so far from the genteel parlors of Boston where she'd been raised. The stares and whispers followed her like shadows as she forced herself to continue walking, desperate to find the mayor's office where she was expected. "That's enough." A deep voice cut through the laughter, silencing the crowd. Clara looked up to see a tall man pushing his way through the throng. His face was partially obscured by the brim of a worn leather hat, but she could see the hard set of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes that held no mockery, only concern. The man shrugged off his duster coat in one fluid motion and stepped toward Clara, draping it gently around her shoulders. The coat smelled of leather, horses, and the open range unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting. "You're the most beautiful I've seen in this dusty town, torn dress or not," he said quietly for her ears alone. Then, turning to face the gawking townspeople, his voice hardened. "Have you all forgotten your manners, or perhaps your humanity?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably under his stern gaze. Clara noticed how they seemed to regard him with a mixture of respect and wariness. "I'm Zachary Thornton," he said, turning back to her. "Most folks call me Zach. Let me help you find wherever you're headed, miss." "Valentine," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara Valentine. I'm the new schoolteacher." Something flickered in Zachary Thornton's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "Well, Miss Valentine, welcome to Pahrump. Not the finest welcome you deserve, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to make it up to you on behalf of these good people who seem to have temporarily misplaced their sense of decency." For the first time since the stagecoach accident, Clara felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." As Zachary led her away from the crowd, his hand respectfully at her elbow, Clara couldn't help but notice how the townspeople parted before him, some nodding in deference, others still whispering behind their hands. "Don't mind them," Zachary said. "News is scarce out here. By tomorrow they'll have something new to gossip about." "Are you the town sheriff?" Clara asked, noting the natural authority he seemed to command. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, revealing a dimple in his weathered cheek. "No, madam, just a rancher. My place is about 5 miles north of town." "Then, why did they listen to you?" Zachary's expression turned pensive. "Let's just say I've earned their respect, one way or another." He guided her toward a whitewashed building with a wooden sign that read Mayor's Office and Town Hall. "Mayor Hollister is expecting you," Zachary said. "He's a good man, though he talks more than a preacher on Sunday. He'll get you settled." Clara hesitated at the steps. "Your coat, Mr. Thornton." "Keep it for now," he said. "I'll be in town for a while yet." He tipped his hat and stepped back. It's not every day Pahrump gets a new schoolteacher, especially one as. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Determined as you seem to be, Miss Valentine." Clara clutched the coat around her shoulders, suddenly aware of how it enveloped her in its warmth like an embrace. "Thank you again, Mr. Thornton." "Zach," he corrected with another hint of that dimpled smile. "Just Zach, Clara," she replied, surprising herself with her forwardness. As she watched him walk away, his tall frame cutting through the dispersing crowd, Clara Valentine had the distinct feeling that her new life in Pahrump, Nevada territory, would be nothing like the quiet, orderly existence she had planned. Mayor Jefferson Hollister was indeed a man of many words. Clara sat patiently in his cluttered office as he expounded on the town's history, the importance of education, and the various personalities she would encounter in Pahrump. "The school's not much, mind you," the portly man admitted, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "Used to be the assay office until the miners moved on to better prospects. But the town council fixed it up best they could. Got about 15 children of school age, though not all of them attend regular like." "I understand," Clara said, trying to focus despite her exhaustion. "I'm prepared to face challenges, Mayor Hollister." The mayor's eyes drifted to her torn dress, partially hidden beneath Zachary Thornton's coat. "Yes, well, I can see that, Miss Valentine. Heard about your mishap with the stagecoach. Terrible business. Drivers being tended to at Doc Wilson's place. Should recover fine." "I'm relieved to hear it," Clara said sincerely. "Now, as for your accommodations," the mayor continued, "the schoolhouse has a small living quarter attached, basic but private. Mrs. Perkins from the general store has stocked it with essentials. The town takes education seriously, Miss Valentine." "I appreciate that, sir. When may I see the school?" "First thing tomorrow would be best. You should rest tonight. In fact," he peered at her over his spectacles, "I believe Mrs. Whitaker at the boarding house has a room ready for you tonight. Thought you might want a proper bed before settling into the schoolhouse quarters." Clara nodded gratefully. "That's very thoughtful. As for your situation," the mayor gestured vaguely at her disheveled appearance, "Mrs. Perkins said to send you directly to the store when we're done here. She's set aside some ready-made dresses that might suit until your belongings can be recovered from the stagecoach." "The townspeople are very kind," Clara said, though she couldn't help remembering the laughter that had greeted her arrival. Mayor Hollister had the grace to look embarrassed. "Don't judge us all by a few thoughtless reactions, Miss Valentine. Folks out here can be rough around the edges, but they've got good hearts, most of them anyway." He cleared his throat. "I see you've already met Zachary Thornton." There was something in his tone that made Clara curious. "Yes, he was very helpful. Is he a prominent citizen?" the mayor chuckled. "You could say that. Owns the biggest ranch in the territory, the Double T, started with nothing 10 years ago and built an empire. Man's as stubborn as the desert itself, but fair. His word carries weight around here." "I see," Clara said, though she didn't. Not really. There was clearly more to Zachary Thornton than met the eye. After finishing with the mayor, Clara made her way to Perkins' general store, acutely aware of the stares that followed her. This time, however, they seemed more curious than mocking, as if Zachary's intervention had changed their perception of her. Mrs. Perkins, a thin woman with kind eyes, clucked sympathetically when Clara entered. "Oh, you poor dear. Come right this way. I've set aside some things for you." To Clara's relief, the storekeeper had indeed prepared several simple but well-made dresses, along with other necessities. "The school board provided an allowance for your initial needs," Mrs. Perkins explained. "Consider it part of your welcome package." "That's very generous," Clara said, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "It was Mr. Thornton's suggestion, actually," Mrs. Perkins said with a knowing smile. "He rode in about an hour before you arrived, mentioned a new school teacher was coming and might need assistance getting settled." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Thornton seems to be quite foresighted." "That's one way of putting it," Mrs. Perkins replied with a chuckle. "Now, there's a washroom in the back where you can clean up and change. You'll feel more yourself once you're properly attired." Fresh water, soap, and a new dress worked wonders for Clara's spirits. The navy blue calico wasn't as fine as her Boston clothes, but it was clean, whole, and surprisingly well fitted. She managed to arrange her hair in a simple but neat style and stepped back into the store feeling transformed. "There she is," Mrs. Perkins exclaimed. "Now that's more like the schoolteacher Pahrump's been waiting for." Clara smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Perkins. Call me Abigail, dear, and you're most welcome. Now I've had your purchases sent over to Mrs. Whittaker's boarding house. It's just down the street, can't miss it. White house with blue shutters." As Clara stepped back onto the boardwalk, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows down Pahrump's Main Street. The town looked different now, less threatening, more like a place where she might belong someday. She was so lost in thought that she nearly collided with a broad chest as she rounded the corner. "Whoa there," came a familiar deep voice, strong hands steadying her shoulders. "Miss Valentine." Clara looked up into Zachary Thornton's face, seeing it clearly for the first time without the shadow of his hat. His features were striking, not conventionally handsome, perhaps, but compelling. Whether bronzed skin stretched over high cheekbones, a straight nose, and a strong jaw covered in dark stubble. But it was his eyes that captured her gray blue like the sky before a storm, with laugh lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. "Mr. Thornton," she managed, suddenly aware of his hand still on her shoulders. He released her and stepped back. "You're looking more settled. Blue suits you." "Thank you, and thank you for arranging." "Well, everything. Mrs. Perkins told me about your foresight regarding my arrival." Zachary shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "It was nothing. Just wanted to make sure you were taken care of after that rough welcome." Clara tilted her head. "How did you know I was coming today?" The mayor seemed surprised when the stagecoach arrived early. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I make it my business to know what happens in and around Pahrump. Stage driver's an old friend. He mentioned picking up a school teacher in Carson City." "I see," Clara said, though she suspected there was more to it. "I actually came looking for you," Zachary said, surprising her. "Thought you might like to know your trunk and other belongings have been recovered from the stagecoach. I sent some of my men to help the driver. They're bringing your things to town now." Relief flooded through Clara. "That's wonderful news. I was worried I'd lost everything." "Not everything," Zachary said. "Just a bit scattered. Should arrive by sundown." He hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to apologize again for the reception you received. Pahrump's a good town despite first impressions." "You have nothing to apologize for, Mr. Thornton. You were the only one who showed me kindness." His eyes softened. "Zach, remember, And don't be too hard on them. Most folks here haven't seen much beyond the territory borders. They forget their manners sometimes, but they mean well. Clara studied him. You defend them quite loyally for someone who lives 5 miles out of town. This place gave me a chance when I had nothing, he said simply. I don't forget that kind of thing. Something in his tone made Clara want to know more, but she sensed it wasn't the time to press. Your coat, she remembered suddenly. I left it at the general store. Keep it, he said. Desert nights get cold. You might need it. He glanced at the setting sun. Speaking of which, I should see you to the boarding house before dark. As they walked side by side down the street, Clara became aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. Some nodded respectfully to Zachary, while others openly stared at the pair. Is it unusual for you to escort newcomers around town? Clara asked quietly. Zachary's mouth quirked up at one corner. Let's just say I'm not known for being sociable. Some might find it surprising. And what about you, Mr. Thornton? Are you surprised to find yourself playing guide to a bedraggled schoolteacher? His laugh was unexpected and rich, like well-aged whiskey. I'm finding that nothing about you is quite what I expected, Miss Valentine, and that doesn't happen to me often. They reached the boarding house too quickly for Clara's liking. On the porch, she turned to face him, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. Will I see you again? The words slipped out before she could think better of them. Zachary's expression grew serious. I expect so. I'm on the school board, after all. You are. Clara couldn't hide her surprise. Don't look so shocked, he said, amusement returning to his eyes. Even cowboys value education. School opens Monday morning. I'll be there to introduce you properly to the town this time without the torn dress. The mention of the dress brought heat to Clara's cheeks again, but she lifted her chin. Thank you for your kindness today, Mr. Thornton. It meant more than you know. Zach, he corrected once more, his voice softening. And Clara. Yes. What I said earlier about you being the most beautiful thing I've seen in this town, I meant it. With that, he tipped his hat and turned, walking away before she could respond. Clara watched him go, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. Whatever she had expected when she decided to come west, it certainly wasn't Zachary Thornton. The boarding house provided a welcome respite after Clara's tumultuous day. Mrs. Whitaker, a widow with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense attitude, showed her to a small but clean room with a real feather bed. Bathrooms down the hall, the older woman explained. Dinner's at 6 sharp. Don't be late or you'll miss out. True to Zachary's word, Clara's trunk arrived just before sundown, delivered by 2 ranch hands who tipped their hats respectfully before departing. After dinner, a hearty stew shared with 3 traveling salesmen and an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as the town's retired doctor. Clara retreated to her room to prepare for the next day. As she unpacked her books and teaching materials, her mind kept returning to Zachary Thornton. There was something compelling about the rancher that went beyond his timely rescue or his striking appearance. A complexity that intrigued her, despite her determination to focus solely on establishing herself as Pahrump's schoolteacher. Don't be foolish, Clara, she muttered to herself as she laid out her lesson plans. You came here to teach, not to moon over the first man who showed you kindness. Yet as she drifted off to sleep that night, it was Zachary's storm-blue eyes she saw and his deep voice that echoed in her dreams. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Clara dressed in one of her own recovered dresses, a modest green gingham that had thankfully survived the stagecoach accident, and made her way to the small white church at the end of town. If she was to be the schoolteacher, it seemed proper to attend services and meet more of the community. The reception she received was a marked improvement from the previous day. Several women nodded politely. A few children stared at her with open curiosity, and the preacher, Reverend Matthews, welcomed her warmly. "We've been praying for a dedicated teacher," he told her after the service. "The children need more than just reading and arithmetic. They need someone to show them there's a world beyond Pahrump." Clara scanned the churchyard. "Does Mr. Thornton attend services?" she asked, trying to sound casual. The Reverend smiled knowingly. "Zach, not regularly. He's more likely to be found working than praying on Sundays. Man never stops, even on the Lord's day." "I see," Clara said, feeling oddly disappointed. "Don't misunderstand," the Reverend added. "Zach Thornton has done more good for this town than most who warm these pews every Sunday. He just shows his faith through works rather than words." After church, Clara decided to walk to the schoolhouse to prepare for the next day. Mayor Hollister had given her directions and the key, explaining it was just beyond the edge of town. The one-room schoolhouse stood on a small rise, its red painted wood faded by sun and wind. A simple bell tower crowned the roof, and a flagpole stood empty beside the front steps. Clara unlocked the door with trembling fingers, excitement and nervousness mingling in her stomach. Inside, the room was larger than she'd expected, with rows of mismatched desks facing a teacher's desk on a small platform. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and glass windows lined both sides, letting in ample light. It was plain but functional, and Clara could immediately envision it filled with students. A door at the back led to her living quarters, a bedroom just large enough for a bed and dresser, a small sitting room with a pot-bellied stove, and a rudimentary kitchen. Simple, but it would be hers alone. Clara spent the afternoon arranging the classroom, writing her name on the blackboard, and preparing lessons for students whose abilities she could only guess at. She was so absorbed in her work that the sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her. Peering through the window, her heart gave a traitorous leap at the sight of Zachary Thornton dismounting from a magnificent black horse. He carried a cloth-wrapped bundle and moved with the easy grace of a man completely at home in his own skin. Clara smoothed her hair and straightened her collar before opening the door. "Mr. Thornton," she greeted, pleased that her voice sounded steady. "This is a surprise. Thought you might be here," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with appreciation. "Green suits you even better than blue." Clara felt color rise in her cheeks. "Did you come to inspect the school board's investment? Actually, I brought you something." He held out the bundle. "House-warming gift, you might say." Curious, Clara unwrapped the cloth to find an American flag neatly folded. "For the schoolhouse," she realized aloud. "Every proper school should fly the flag," Zachary said. "The old one blew away in a windstorm last winter, never got replaced." "It's perfect," Clara said, genuinely touched. "Would you help me raise it?" Together they went outside to the flagpole. Zachary showed her how to attach the flag properly, then slowly raised it, the stars and stripes unfurling against the clear Nevada sky. "There," he said, standing back to admire it. "Now it looks like a proper school." Clara studied his profile as he gazed at the flag. "You care about this place, don't you? Not just your ranch, but Pahrump itself." Zachary turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I came here with nothing but the clothes on my back and a half-broken horse. This town gave me work when I needed it, credit when I couldn't pay, and respect when I'd earned it. So yes, I care." "Is that why you're on the school board? To give back?" "Partly," he admitted. "Also because education matters. I had precious little of it myself, but enough to know its value." Clara's surprise must have shown on her face because he laughed. "Did you think cowboys can't appreciate learning, Miss Valentine?" "No, She faltered. "I'm discovering there's more to you than meets the eye, Mr. Thornton." "Zach," he corrected, his eyes crinkling. And I could say the same about you, Clara Valentine. Not many Eastern ladies would pick themselves up after a stagecoach accident and walk into town, much less face down a crowd of gawking strangers. I didn't face them down, she reminded him. You did that for me. Don't sell yourself short. You were standing there with your chin up and fire in your eyes when I found you. That took courage. They walked back into the schoolhouse, where Zachary leaned against a desk, watching as Clara arranged books on a shelf. Tell me why you came west, he said. A refined Boston lady like yourself could have taught in any number of comfortable Eastern schools. Clara considered the question, wanting to give an honest answer. I suppose I wanted something that was mine alone. In Boston, I was always someone's daughter, someone's niece, someone's proper young lady. Here I'm just Clara Valentine, schoolteacher. Zachary nodded. I understand that better than you might think. And you? Clara asked. How did a man with nothing but the clothes on his back become the owner of the biggest ranch in the territory? A shadow passed over his features. That's a longer story than we have time for today. Clara sensed she'd touched on something private. Another time, perhaps. Perhaps. His expression lightened. Are you ready for tomorrow? As ready as I can be, not knowing what to expect. You'll do fine, he said with surprising certainty. The children will love you. How can you be so sure? Zachary smiled, that dimple appearing in his cheek again. Because you care enough to be nervous about it. That's half the battle won already. As the afternoon light began to fade, Zachary reluctantly announced he needed to return to his ranch. At the door, he hesitated. The town council is hosting a welcome dinner for you next Saturday at the hotel, he said. Nothing fancy, just a way to properly introduce you to everyone. That's very kind, Clara said. Will you be there? Wouldn't miss it. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Good luck tomorrow, schoolteacher. You're going to change lives in this town. With that, he was gone, leaving Clara with the peculiar feeling that her own life was already changing in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of excitement and trepidation for Clara. She dressed with care in a high-necked blue dress, her hair neatly arranged in a practical bun. After a simple breakfast, she rang the school bell at precisely 8 o'clock, her heart pounding with anticipation. One by one, children began to arrive, some eager, some reluctant, all curious about their new teacher. By 8:30, 13 students between the ages of 6 and 16 had taken seats in the classroom, looking at her with varying degrees of interest. Good morning, Clara began, summoning her most confident voice. I am Miss Valentine, your new teacher. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you and helping you learn. A small hand shot up in the front row. Yes, Clara acknowledged the tiny girl with blonde braids. Are you the lady who came to town with the torn dress? The child asked innocently. My mama said you looked like you'd been wrestling with wolves. A ripple of giggles went through the classroom. Clara felt her cheeks warm but maintained her composure. I was in a stagecoach accident, she explained calmly. Sometimes accidents happen, but what matters is how we recover from them. Now, let's begin by introducing ourselves, shall we? The morning proceeded more smoothly after that. Clara assessed the children's various educational levels and divided them into groups for instruction. Some could barely read, while others showed surprising aptitude in arithmetic or history. By lunchtime, she had begun to learn their names and personalities from serious-minded Joseph Fletcher, the eldest at 16, to mischievous twins Timothy and Thomas Wright, who seemed determined to test her patience at every turn. After dismissing the children for the day, Clara sat at her desk, making notes on each student and planning the next day's lessons. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the visitor in the doorway until a shadow fell across her papers. Successful first day? Zachary asked, leaning against the doorframe with casual grace. Clara looked up, unable to suppress her smile at the sight of him. I believe so, though ask me again in a week. The Fletcher boy giving you trouble, Zachary guessed, entering the room and taking a seat on one of the front desks. Joseph? No, he's quite serious about his studies. It's the Wright twins who bear watching. Zachary chuckled. Those two are trouble on four legs. Their father's my foreman at the Double T, good man, but he's got his hands full with those boys since their mother passed. I didn't know, Clara said softly. That explains some things. Don't go too easy on them, Zachary advised. They'll run roughshod if you let them, but they're smart as whips when they apply themselves. Clara tilted her head, studying him. You know the children well. Most of them, he acknowledged. Hard not to in a town this size, and like I said, I value education. Try to keep tabs on who's attending and who isn't. Is that why you're here, checking attendance? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Actually, I came to invite you to dinner. Thought you might appreciate a meal you don't have to cook yourself after your first day. Clara blinked in surprise. Dinner? Nothing improper, he assured her quickly. The hotel dining room. Best food in Pahrump, which isn't saying much, but better than your own cooking, I'd wager, after a day wrangling children. The invitation was tempting. Clara had been dreading returning to her quarters to prepare a solitary meal. Still, she hesitated, aware of how it might appear. People will talk, she said. People always talk, Zachary replied with a shrug. But if it makes you more comfortable, we can invite Mayor Hollister to join us. He never turns down a free meal. Clara laughed despite herself. That won't be necessary. I'd be delighted to join you for dinner, Mr. Thornton. Zach, he corrected automatically, standing up. Shall we say 6 o'clock? I have some business to attend to first. 6 would be fine, Clara agreed. I'll need time to finish my notes and freshen up. Zachary nodded, his eyes lingering on her face. You look like you were born to be in a classroom, Clara Valentine. Those children are lucky to have you. Before she could respond to the unexpected compliment, he tipped his hat and was gone, leaving Clara to wonder what exactly was happening between them and whether she should allow it to continue. The Pahrump Hotel dining room was the finest establishment in town, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards. Still, the tablecloths were clean, the oil lamps cast a warm glow, and the aroma of roasting beef filled the air as Clara entered at precisely 6 o'clock. Zachary rose from a corner table when he saw her, and Clara was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the trail-worn cowboy. In his place stood a gentleman in a crisp white shirt, dark waistcoat, and pressed trousers. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he had shaved, revealing a strong jawline and the dimple in his cheek that Clara found increasingly distracting. Miss Valentine, he greeted her, pulling out her chair. You look lovely this evening. Clara had changed into her best preserved dress, a dark burgundy with modest lace at the collar and cuffs. Thank you. You clean up quite well yourself, Mr. Thornton. Special occasion, he said with a smile, resuming his seat. It's not every day I dine with the most interesting woman in Nevada territory. Clara felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. I doubt that's true, but it's kind of you to say. I'm not known for saying things I don't mean, Zachary replied, his gray-blue eyes holding her steadily. The waiter arrived to take their orders, breaking the moment. Clara was grateful for the interruption, unsettled by the intensity of Zachary's gaze and her own reaction to it. Over dinner, their conversation flowed easily. Zachary asked thoughtful questions about her first day of teaching, listening intently to her observations about each student. In turn, Clara learned more about the town and its inhabitants from Zachary's perspective. Pahrump wasn't much more than a watering hole when I arrived, he explained. Silver Strike brought the first real settlement. When the vein played out, most miners moved on, but some stayed to ranch or farm. The springs make it possible to raise cattle even in this desert. And that's what you do, raise cattle, among other things, Zachary nodded. Started with just a few head, built it up over the years. The Double T runs about 2,000 head now, plus some quarter horses I breed for quality. That's impressive, Clara said sincerely. You must be very proud of what you've accomplished. A shadow passed over his features. Pride's a luxury I don't often indulge in. Each day brings its own challenges. You sound like a man who's had to fight for everything he has, Clara observed quietly. Zachary studied her for a long moment. You're perceptive, schoolteacher. Most people see the ranch, the horses, the respect I've earned, and think it all came easy. Nothing worthwhile ever comes easy, Clara said. At least that's what my father always said. Wise man, your father. He was, Clara agreed, a pang of sadness touching her heart. He passed away 2 years ago. That's partly why I came west. Too many memories in Boston. Zachary's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss, Clara. Thank you. What about your family? She asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about his background. Zachary's face closed like a shutter. Don't have any to speak of. Clara sensed she'd touched on a painful subject and didn't press further. Instead, she steered the conversation towards safer territory, books they'd read, places they'd seen, the challenges of life in the territory. By the time they finished their apple pie and coffee, Clara felt as though she'd known Zachary Thornton for years rather than days. Despite his reticence about his past, he revealed himself to be well-read, thoughtful, and possessed of a dry wit that frequently made her laugh. May I walk you home? He asked as they left the hotel. I'd like that, Clara replied, drawing her shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. They strolled through Pahrump's quiet streets, the desert stars brilliant overhead. Clara was acutely aware of Zachary's tall figure beside her, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. Will I see you at school tomorrow? She asked as they approached the schoolhouse. Not tomorrow, he said. I need to ride out to the North Range, check on some new calves. Might be gone a few days. Clara tried to hide her disappointment. I understand, ranching doesn't stop for school teachers. But I'll be back for the welcome dinner on Saturday, he promised. Save me a dance, there's dancing, Clara asked, surprised. Zachary grinned. There is now. I'll make sure of it. They reached her door and Clara turned to face him. Thank you for dinner, Zach. I enjoyed the evening very much. So did I, he said softly. For a moment, Clara thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. Good night, Clara Valentine. Dream of pleasant things. As she watched him walk away, Clara knew exactly what, or rather, who would fill her dreams that night. The rest of the week passed in a blur of lessons, getting to know her students and settling into her new home. Clara threw herself into teaching, determined to make a difference in the lives of Pahrump's children. By Friday, she had established a routine and earned the respect, if not the complete obedience, of even the Wright twins. Saturday's welcome dinner occupied her thoughts more than she cared to admit. Clara spent the morning cleaning her small quarters, then took special care with her appearance, choosing her finest dress, a deep emerald green silk that her mother had insisted she pack, for special occasions. The town hall had been transformed for the event, with lanterns strung from the ceiling, tables arranged around a cleared space for dancing, and wildflowers adorning every surface. It seemed the entire population of Pahrump had turned out, dressed in their Sunday best. Mayor Hollister greeted Clara with enthusiasm, introducing her to a dizzying array of townspeople whose names blurred together. She searched the crowd for Zachary, but didn't see him among the early arrivals. "He'll be here," Mrs. Perkins assured her, noticing her wandering gaze. Zach Thornton doesn't make promises he doesn't keep. An hour into the event, Clara had danced with the mayor, the banker, and 2 merchants, all the while wondering if Zachary had encountered some delay at his ranch. The band, a trio of local men with varying degrees of musical talent, struck up another tune, and Clara found herself accepting the hand of Joseph Fletcher's father, a solemn man who worked at the assayer's office. Halfway through the dance, a ripple went through the crowd. Clara glanced toward the entrance, and her heart skipped a beat. Zachary stood in the doorway, dressed in a formal black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His dark hair was neatly combed, and even from across the room, Clara could see the intensity in his eyes as they searched the crowd and found her. She finished the dance in a daze, barely hearing Mr. Fletcher's polite conversation. As the music ended, she thanked him automatically and turned to find Zachary standing before her. "I believe you promised me a dance, Miss Valentine," he said, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. "I believe you're the one who made that promise, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied, trying to sound composed despite the rapid beating of her heart. Zachary smiled, offering his hand. "Then allow me to make good on it." As if on cue, the band began a waltz. Zachary led Clara to the center of the dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers firmly. They moved together as if they'd danced 100 times before, his sure lead making Clara feel graceful and light. "You look beautiful tonight," Zachary said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "That green brings out the fire in your eyes." "You're quite the flatterer, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied, though pleasure warmed her at his words. "Not flattery if it's true," he countered. "And it's still Zach, remember, especially when we're dancing." Clara became aware that they had become the center of attention, with many of the townspeople watching them with undisguised interest. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," Zachary said simply. "I've never much cared what people think." "As a schoolteacher, I have to care," Clara reminded him. "My reputation affects my ability to do my job." Zachary's expression grew serious. "Clara, there's not a person in this room who doesn't respect you for what you've already accomplished this week." The children can't stop talking about their new teacher. Even the Wright twins have been spotted reading voluntarily. Clara couldn't help but smile at that. "They're good boys, underneath the mischief. All my students are eager to learn given the right encouragement. See, you're changing lives already, just as I predicted." The music ended, but Zachary didn't release her immediately. Instead, he held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them that made Clara's breath catch. The spell was broken by Mayor Hollister's booming voice calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a toast to our new schoolteacher, Miss Clara Valentine, who has already made quite an impression on our young people." Glasses were raised amid a chorus of "Hear, hear." Clara felt herself blushing as all eyes turned to her. "Miss Valentine, would you like to say a few words?" the mayor prompted. Clara stepped forward, grateful for the years of proper Boston upbringing that had prepared her for such moments. "Thank you all for the warm welcome you've extended to me," she began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I'm honored to be entrusted with the education of Pahrump's children. They are bright, curious, and full of potential. With your support, I hope to help them grow into the future leaders of this community and beyond." Her simple speech was met with enthusiastic applause. As Clara stepped back, her eyes met Zachary's across the room. The pride and admiration in his gaze warmed her more than all the applause combined. The evening continued with more dancing, food, and conversation. Clara found herself repeatedly drawn to Zachary's side, their conversation picking up as naturally as if it had never paused. She learned that his trip to check on the calves had been successful, though marred by an encounter with a mountain lion that had cost him one of his younger steers. "Nature's way out here," he explained philosophically. "Predator and prey, the strong surviving while the weak don't. Harsh but honest at least." "Is that how you see life?" Clara asked. As a struggle between predator and prey, Zachary considered the question. "Not always. But I've seen enough to know that strength matters. Not just physical strength, but strength of character, of will." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Like the strength it takes for a Boston lady to make a new life in a rough mining town." Before Clara could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. A ranch hand, dusty and out of breath, burst into the hall and made straight for Zachary. "Mr. Thornton, fire at the North Range. Lightning strike hit the dry grass. Men are trying to contain it, but it's spreading fast toward the main house." Zachary's expression transformed instantly, all warmth replaced by focused determination. "Get my horse," he ordered, then turned to Clara. "I have to go." "Of course," she said, though disappointment coursed through her. "Be careful." Zachary hesitated, then surprised her by taking her hand and squeezing it briefly. "I'll come see you when it's over," he promised, his eyes intense on hers. Then he was gone, striding purposefully toward the door with the ranch hand at his heels. The dinner continued, but for Clara, all the joy had gone out of the evening. She found herself worrying about Zachary and his men fighting the fire, imagining the danger they faced. "Don't fret, dear," Mrs. Perkins said, noticing her distraction. "Zach Thornton has faced worse than a prairie fire and come through just fine. That man has more lives than a cat." Clara managed a smile. "I'm sure you're right. It's just unsettling." The older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly. "He's quite something, our Mr. Thornton. Never seen him so taken with anyone before. Dancing in public, no less." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're just friends, Mrs. Perkins. He's been kind to me, that's all." "If you say so, dear," the storekeeper replied, clearly unconvinced. "But I've known Zachary Thornton for 10 years, and I've never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you." Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she excused herself, claiming fatigue. The truth was, she needed time alone to sort through her jumbled emotions. In just 1 week, Zachary Thornton had become far more important to her than she could have imagined possible. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. As she walked back to the schoolhouse under the star-filled sky, Clara wondered what the coming days would bring, and whether she was prepared for where this unexpected path might lead. 3 days passed with no word from Zachary. Clara threw herself into her teaching, trying not to worry, but found her thoughts constantly straying to the Double T Ranch and its owner. Had the fire been contained? Was Zachary safe? The questions haunted her, but she hesitated to ask directly, not wanting to fuel the town gossip that already linked their names. On Wednesday afternoon, as Clara was dismissing her students, she noticed a rider approaching the schoolhouse. Her heart leaped, thinking it might be Zachary, but as the figure drew closer, she realized it was one of his ranch hands, the same young man who had brought news of the fire. "Miss Valentine," he greeted her, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Mr. Thornton sent me with a message." "Is he all right?" Clara asked, unable to hide her concern. "Yes, madam. Fire's out, but it did some damage to the north pasture and one of the line cabins. Mr. Thornton's been working day and night to get things sorted." The young man pulled an envelope from his vest. He asked me to deliver this to you personal like. Clara accepted the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, madam, Tom Jenkins. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Would you like some water or coffee before you ride back? The ranch hand shook his head. Much obliged, but I best get back. Still plenty to do at the ranch. After he'd ridden away, Clara opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in a bold, masculine hand. Clara, I apologize for my abrupt departure Saturday night and for not coming to see you as promised. The fire was worse than expected and required my full attention. We lost some grazing land and a cabin, but no lives, thank God. I find myself thinking of you even amid the chaos. Your presence in Pahrump has brought unexpected light to my life. I would very much like to call on you properly this Sunday, if you're agreeable. Perhaps a picnic by Walker Springs. It's a pleasant spot about 2 miles from town. Send word with Jenkins if you're willing to indulge me in this. Yours, Zachary. Clara read the letter twice, her heart beating rapidly at the simple closing yours. Such a small word, yet it carried weight beyond its size. Mr. Jenkins. She called, hurrying after the departing ranch hand. When he reined in his horse, she smiled up at him. Please tell Mr. Thornton that I would be delighted to accept his invitation for Sunday. The young man grinned. Yes, madam, he'll be mighty pleased to hear it. As she watched him ride away, Clara acknowledged to herself that she was mighty pleased as well. The prospect of seeing Zachary again filled her with a happiness she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough for Clara. She found herself counting the hours, a distraction that didn't go unnoticed by her more perceptive students. Miss Valentine, you made the same mistake twice. Joseph Fletcher pointed out during Friday's arithmetic lesson, indicating where she'd written the wrong answer on the blackboard. Clara flushed with embarrassment. You're quite right, Joseph. Thank you for catching that. She corrected the error, reminding herself to focus on the present rather than daydreaming about Sunday. When the day finally arrived, Clara dressed with particular care in a light blue dress with white trim. Practical enough for a picnic, but pretty enough to be special. She pinned her hair in a simple style, with a few curls framing her face, and added a touch of rose water, a small vanity she rarely indulged in. Zachary arrived promptly at 11, driving a smart buggy pulled by a gleaming chestnut mare. The sight of him tall and straight in the driver's seat, his face breaking into a warm smile when he saw her, made Clara's heart flutter like a schoolgirl's. You look lovely, he said as he helped her into the buggy, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, Clara replied, noticing the faint smell of smoke that still clung to him beneath the scent of soap and leather. You look tired. Zachary chuckled as he took his seat beside her. Direct as always. Yes, it's been a long few days, but nothing that can't be mended with time and work. I was worried about you, Clara admitted as they set off down the road leading out of town. Zachary's expression softened. Were you now? Of course. When someone disappears into a fire, it's natural to be concerned. I appreciate the concern, he said, his voice gentle. It's been some time since anyone worried about my welfare. The simple statement hinted at a loneliness that struck a chord in Clara's heart. Well, get used to it, she said lightly. School teachers are notorious worriers. Zachary laughed, the sound warming Clara more than the spring sunshine. I'll bear that in mind. Walker Springs proved to be a lovely oasis in the desert landscape, a small stream flowing from a natural spring, bordered by cottonwood trees and lush grasses. Zachary had chosen a spot beneath the largest tree, spreading a blanket on the ground and unpacking a basket that contained cold chicken, biscuits, apple pie, and a bottle of white wine. "This is wonderful," Clara said, looking around at the peaceful setting. "How did you discover this place?" "It's part of Double T Land," Zachary explained, pouring wine into 2 glasses. "I camped here my first night in the territory, before I had anything to my name except determination and a stubborn streak." "And now you own it," Clara observed. "There's a poetry in that." Zachary looked at her with surprise. "I've never thought of it that way, but you're right." He raised his glass. "To finding our place in the world." "To finding our place," Clara echoed, touched by the sentiment. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily between them. Zachary told her about his plans to expand the ranch, breeding quarter horses alongside his cattle operation. Clara shared her hopes for the school, including a library and perhaps even advanced classes for students like Joseph Fletcher, who showed particular promise. "You really care about them," Zachary observed. "It's not just a job to you." "No," Clara agreed. "Every child deserves the chance to reach their potential, regardless of where they were born or their circumstances." "Even the Wright twins," Zachary teased. "Especially the Wright twins," Clara laughed. "Timothy showed me a drawing he made yesterday, a surprisingly good rendition of a hawk in flight. There's talent there, beneath all the mischief." After they'd eaten, Zachary suggested a walk along the stream. As they strolled side by side, Clara found herself drawn closer to him, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that sent tingles up her arm. "May I ask you something personal?" Clara ventured after a comfortable silence. "You can ask," Zachary replied, a hint of wariness entering his voice. "The other night, you mentioned not having family to speak of. What did you mean?" Zachary was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. Finally, he stopped walking and turned to face her. "My mother died when I was born," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "My father wasn't much of a father. He drank, gambled, moved us from town to town across the frontier. When I was 16, he lost me in a poker game." Clara gasped. "Lost you? What do you mean?" "He bet me as collateral against a man named Blackwell, a rancher with a reputation for working his hands half to death. When my father couldn't pay his debt, Blackwell took me instead." Zachary's jaw tightened at the memory. "I worked on his ranch for 3 years, little more than a slave. Finally escaped when I was 19, made my way west until I ended up here." "That's horrible," Clara said softly, instinctively reaching for his hand. "I'm so sorry." Zachary's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "Don't be. It made me who I am. Taught me to rely on myself, to value freedom, to judge a person by their actions rather than their words." "And your father, did you ever see him again?" "No. Heard he died in a bar fight in Missouri about 5 years ago." Zachary's voice held no emotion. "Can't say I mourned him." Clara squeezed his hand. "Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy." Zachary looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "It's strange," he said quietly. "I've never told anyone that story before, not the whole truth of it anyway." "Why tell me?" Clara asked, her heart beating faster at the intensity of his gaze. "Because you looked at me that first day like you saw something worth seeing," he said simply. "And every day since, you've looked at me the same way. Makes a man want to be worthy of that look." Before Clara could respond, Zachary reached up to touch her cheek gently. "Clara Valentine, you walked into Pahrump with your dignity in tatters but your spirit intact, and you've been amazing me ever since." "Zach," she whispered, hardly daring to breathe as he moved closer. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, his voice low and rough. "If that's not what you want, tell me to stop." Clara couldn't speak, could only nod slightly as Zachary's head lowered toward hers. His lips touched hers tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. The kiss was gentle yet insistent, awakening feelings in Clara that she had never experienced before. Her arms slid around his neck as his encircled her waist, drawing her closer until she could feel the strong beat of his heart against her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing quickly, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you," he admitted. "Even with my torn dress and dusty face," Clara teased, though her voice trembled slightly. "Especially then," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You looked like a queen who'd lost her crown but not her majesty." Clara laughed softly. "You have a way with words for a cowboy." "Only with you," he replied, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You inspire poetry in a man who spent most of his life thinking about cattle and horses." They walked back to the picnic blanket hand in hand, a new awareness between them. As they packed up to return to town, Clara realized that something fundamental had shifted in her world. Zachary Thornton was no longer just the kind man who had come to her rescue, or the intriguing rancher who made her pulse quicken. He had become essential to her happiness in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. The following weeks brought a deepening of their relationship that didn't go unnoticed in Pahrump. Zachary began stopping by the schoolhouse regularly, sometimes just to say hello, other times bringing small gifts, wildflowers picked on the range, a book he thought she might enjoy, a beautiful quill pen carved from an eagle feather by one of his ranch hands. On Sundays, they rode out together to explore the territory, picnicking at Walker Springs, visiting a hidden canyon with ancient Native American petroglyphs, or simply riding side by side across the open range of the Double T. Clara discovered a freedom in these excursions, a joy in the vast landscape and the man who moved through it with such natural confidence. For his part, Zachary found himself opening up to Clara in ways he had never done with anyone. He told her stories of his early days in the territory, the struggles to build his ranch from nothing, the mistakes and triumphs that had shaped his path. With her, he could be himself, completely not the stern ranch owner others saw, but the man beneath the hard-earned reputation. The town's reaction to their courtship was predictably mixed. Some, like Mrs. Perkins and Reverend Matthews, expressed quiet approval. Others, particularly mothers with unmarried daughters who had set their sights on the territory's most eligible bachelor, were less enthused. A few voiced concerns about the propriety of a schoolteacher being courted so openly. But Mayor Hollister silenced these critics by pointing out that Clara's students were thriving under her care. Test scores have improved, attendance is up, and even the Wright twins turned in their assignments this week, he declared at a town council meeting. Miss Valentine's personal life is her own business as long as she continues to excel in the classroom. One warm evening in late May, about 6 weeks after Clara's arrival in Pahrump, Zachary invited her to dinner at his ranch. It would be her first visit to the Double T, and Clara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as Zachary's buggy approached the property. The main house came into view, a substantial 2-story structure of native stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. A bunkhouse, barn, corral, and various outbuildings completed the setting, all well-maintained and speaking of prosperity earned through hard work. "It's beautiful," Clara said as Zachary helped her down from the buggy. "It's home," he replied simply, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. Inside, the house reflected its owner, solid, unpretentious, yet comfortable and well-appointed. A Mexican woman named Rosa, who Zachary explained had been his housekeeper since he built the main house 5 years earlier, had prepared a sumptuous dinner of roast beef, vegetables from the kitchen garden, and fresh bread. After dinner, Zachary showed Clara through the house, ending in his study, a room lined with bookshelves that surprised her with their contents. Alongside practical volumes on ranching and horse breeding were works of literature, history, and philosophy that Clara wouldn't have expected. "You're an educated man, Zachary Thornton," she observed, running her fingers along the spines of books by Shakespeare, Dickens, and Emerson. "Self-educated," he corrected. "Whenever I had money to spare, I bought books, read them by lamplight after long days working." Knowledge seemed the only way to truly be free. Clara turned to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked softly. Zachary crossed the room to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. "I brought you here tonight for a reason, Clara. I wanted you to see my home, to understand what I've built, and to ask if you could see yourself being part of it." Clara's heart began to race. "Zach, I love you, Clara Valentine," he said, his voice deep and sure. "I think I've loved you since you walked into Pahrump with your torn dress and your head held high. You've brought light and laughter into my life when I didn't even know I was living in darkness." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a single diamond that caught the lamplight and scattered it like stars. "I'm asking you to be my wife," Zachary said, dropping to one knee before her. "To make this house a home, to build a life together that's richer and fuller than either of us could create alone." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. In just 6 short weeks, this man had become the center of her world, awakening feelings she had never imagined possible. Yet doubts lingered at the edges of her mind. "What about the school?" she asked. "The children need me." Zachary smiled. "I would never ask you to give up teaching. We can find a way to make it work. Hire a proper carriage to take you to town each day, or build a new school closer to the ranch. Whatever you want. And you're sure? We haven't known each other very long." "I've never been more sure of anything," Zachary said firmly. "Some people search their whole lives for what we've found, Clara. I don't intend to wait when I know with absolute certainty that you're the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." Clara gazed down at him, this strong, complicated man who had captured her heart so completely. All her doubts melted away in the warmth of his eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zachary Thornton, I will marry you." Joy transformed his face as he slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their shared future. When they finally broke apart, Zachary pressed his lips to her forehead. "You've made me the happiest man in the territory." "And I'm the happiest woman," Clara replied, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Who would have thought that a torn dress and a dusty arrival could lead to this?" Zachary chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against her cheek. "I think I knew the moment I saw you standing there, defying the town's laughter with nothing but courage and grace. You were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and you still are." The news of their engagement spread through Pahrump like wildfire. Most of the town expressed delight, though a few disappointed mothers sniffed about unseemly haste and Eastern women with ambitious designs. Clara and Zachary paid little attention to the gossip, too absorbed in their happiness and plans for the future. They set the wedding date for August 15, giving them time to prepare properly while not delaying unnecessarily. Clara wrote to her aunt in Boston, her only remaining family, inviting her to the ceremony, but not expecting the elderly woman to make such a journey. To her surprise, Aunt Alina replied that she wouldn't miss her only niece's wedding for the world and would arrive by the first week of August. The summer passed in a whirlwind of activity. Clara continued teaching until the end of the school term in late June, then divided her time between preparing for the wedding and making plans for the next school year. Zachary threw himself into expanding the main house, adding a larger library that he insisted would be Clara's domain, as well as refreshing every room in anticipation of his bride's arrival. In early August, Aunt Alina arrived on the stagecoach, a diminutive woman with Clara's blue eyes and an unexpected spirit of adventure. She took to Pahrump with surprising enthusiasm and to Zachary with immediate approval. "He loves you completely, my dear," she told Clara the night before the wedding as they sat in Clara's schoolhouse quarters. "I can see it in every look, every gesture. Your parents would have been pleased with your choice. Even though he's a Nevada rancher and not a Boston lawyer," Clara teased. "Especially because of that," her aunt replied with a twinkle in her eye. "Your mother always said you had a wild heart beneath your proper exterior. She would have recognized a kindred spirit in your Zachary." The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The ceremony was held in the town church, which had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons under Mrs. Perkins's expert direction. It seemed the entire population of Pahrump and the surrounding ranches had turned out for the occasion, filling the small building to capacity. Clara wore a gown of ivory silk that Aunt Alina had brought from Boston, with a veil of delicate lace that had been her mother's. As she walked down the aisle on Mayor Hollister's arm, the mayor having insisted on the honor in the absence of Clara's father, her eyes found Zachary waiting at the altar. He stood tall and proud in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his face solemn yet radiant with happiness. When their eyes met, everything else faded away: the crowded church, the whispered admiration, the years of loneliness each had endured before finding the other. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Matthews began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other a love that enriches not only their own lives but the life of our community." The ceremony passed in a blur for Clara, her attention focused entirely on Zachary, his strong hands holding hers, his deep voice as he repeated his vows, the tenderness in his eyes as he slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Zachary kissed her then, a kiss that managed to be both proper enough for church and passionate enough to leave no doubt of his feelings. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed on the grounds of the town hall was the largest Pahrump had ever seen. Tables groaned with food contributed by every household. A proper dance floor had been constructed under Zachary's supervision, and even the children were included in the festivities, with Clara's students presenting the couple with a handmade quilt they had secretly created with Mrs. Perkins's help. As the afternoon gave way to evening, lanterns were lit, and the dancing continued. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner: the mayor, Joseph Fletcher's father, even Timothy and Thomas Wright, who had cleaned up remarkably well for the occasion and managed to dance without stepping on her toes. Finally, Zachary reclaimed her for a waltz, drawing her close as the music swirled around them. "Happy, Mrs. Thornton?" he asked, his voice low in her ear. "Completely," Clara replied, her heart overflowing with joy, "though I'm still getting used to my new name." "You wear it beautifully," Zachary assured her, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. "Like everything else." As midnight approached, the couple prepared to depart for the double tea, where they would spend their wedding night before leaving the next day for a 2-week honeymoon in San Francisco, a surprise Zachary had arranged months in advance. Amid a shower of rice and good wishes, They climbed into Zachary's finest carriage, which had been decorated with flowers and ribbons by his ranch hands. Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder as they drove away from the town, the stars overhead and their future stretching before them like an unopened book. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Clara asked as the lights of Pahrump faded behind them. "When everyone was laughing at my torn dress," Zachary smiled, drawing her closer. "I said you were the most beautiful thing I'd seen in this dusty town, and I meant it." "You changed my life with those words," Clara said softly. "You gave me back my dignity when I needed it most." "And you changed mine by believing in the man I could be, not just the man I was," Zachary replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We saved each other, Clara Thornton." As the carriage carried them toward home and the promise of their life together, Clara knew that she had found something precious beyond measure, a love born from an unexpected moment of kindness. A love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead in the wild and beautiful territory they both now called home. 5 years later, Clara sat on the wide porch of the Double T ranch house, watching as Zachary led their 3-year-old daughter, Eleanor, on her first pony ride around the corral. The little girl's laughter floated on the summer air, her dark curls so like her father's bouncing with each careful step of the gentle pony. "Look, Mama, I'm riding," Eleanor called, her face alight with the same fearless joy that Clara had come to associate with the Thornton spirit. "I see you, sweetheart." "You're doing wonderfully," Clara called back, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach where their second child, a boy, according to Dr. Wilson, would arrive by winter. From the bunkhouse came the sound of voices as the ranch hands prepared for their evening meal. The Double T had prospered even beyond Zachary's ambitious plans, now employing 15 permanent hands and additional seasonal workers during the busy times. The horse breeding program had gained territory-wide recognition, with Double T quarter horses sought after for their speed, intelligence, and stamina. Clara's own career had evolved alongside the ranch's growth. After their marriage, she had continued teaching at the Pahrump school for 2 more years. Then, with Zachary's encouragement and financial backing, she had established a new school on Double T land, open to the children of ranch employees as well as those from neighboring properties. The small school now had 2 teachers, Clara and a young woman from Carson City, who had answered her advertisement last year. The combination of motherhood and running the school kept Clara busy, but she had never been happier. The shy, proper Boston lady who had arrived in Pahrump with a torn dress and wounded pride had blossomed into a confident woman who moved easily between the roles of teacher, wife, mother, and ranch mistress. Zachary completed the pony ride and lifted Eleanor from the saddle, swinging her high in the air before setting her on his shoulders. As they approached the porch, Clara's heart swelled with love for this family they had created together. "Did you see me, Mama?" Eleanor asked again as Zachary set her down on the porch steps. "I did indeed," Clara assured her, smoothing back her daughter's wild curls. "You're going to be an excellent rider like your papa." "Better," Zachary said with a wink at his daughter. "She's got natural talent." "And her father's fearlessness," Clara added wryly. "And her mother's determination," Zachary countered, leaning down to kiss Clara's cheek before settling beside her on the porch swing, pulling Eleanor onto his lap. As the sun began to set over the Nevada desert, painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder, contentment filling her soul. Their path hadn't always been smooth. They had weathered droughts, difficult financial decisions, the challenges of integrating their different backgrounds and experiences, but through it all, their love had only deepened. "Penny for your thoughts, schoolteacher," Zachary said softly, his arm around her shoulders. Clara smiled, watching as Alina's eyelids grew heavy against her father's chest. I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if my stagecoach hadn't overturned that day. If I'd arrived in Pahrump looking neat and proper with my dignity intact, Zachary chuckled. I'd have noticed you anyway. A woman like you couldn't go unnoticed, torn dress or not. Perhaps, Clara allowed, but would you have said those words, the ones that changed everything? Maybe not in the same way, he admitted, but I'd have found my way to you somehow. Some things are meant to be, Clara Thornton. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Clara thought about the strange, beautiful journey that had brought her to this moment, from a Boston parlor to a Nevada ranch house, from a lonely schoolteacher to a woman surrounded by love. A journey that began with laughter at her expense and the unexpected kindness of a man who saw beyond appearances to the heart within. Some things are indeed meant to be, she agreed, turning her face up to his. And I'm grateful every day that you were meant for me. Zachary's kiss was as tender as it was familiar, a promise renewed with each passing day. As Alina dozed against his chest and their unborn son moved beneath Clara's hand, the couple sat in comfortable silence, watching night fall over the land they both loved. In that peaceful moment, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of the man beside her and the family they had created together. From torn dress to wedding gown, from schoolteacher to beloved wife and mother, her journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. And it had all begun with those simple, transformative words spoken by a stranger who would become her everything. "You're the most beautiful I've seen,"